I wanted to find out what spreading the gospel to Jews implies and the modus operandi this organization employs. My guest is undoubtedly highly qualified to talk about the tactics of proselytizing Jews to bring them to believe in Jesus as the Messiah and the training required. She is Shannon Nuszen, a former evangelical missionary who is today a Torah-observant Jew. Now, I know that you live some distance from Jerusalem and therefore deserve special thanks for coming to the studio in these difficult times. You tried to get Jews to Christianity, and as a Christian, you became a Jew. This is surely very unusual. So before you enlighten us about the technique and training of how to missionize Christianity to Jews, would you just briefly tell us the main stations of your eventful life that brought you to this point?
I was born into an evangelical family. My father was an Assembly of God minister. As a teenager, I was trained as a missionary to my peers, and I was very good at it. Later in life, as an adult, I got into more of the Messianic movement, which was Christianity with a Jewish flavor to it, teach Jewish traditions, and they would observe Jewish holidays, which I loved. I liked learning the Jewish traditions behind many of the holidays and the things that Jews do. Learning to evangelize Jews was different than I had learned as a teenager as a typical missionary. For Jews, you needed to learn a little bit more about the Tanakh. Jews seem to be more educated. So I needed to learn the verses that would prove that Jesus was the Messiah if I were to convert any Jews, which is what I did. Unfortunately, I was successful with less affiliated Jews and secular Jews. My problem came about when I would encounter more religious Jews, Orthodox Jews. They seemed to be ready for me. They would taunt me and make fun of me and give me a really hard time. I had my set verses that I had learned in order to evangelize a Jew, and they would tell me that they were mistranslated, I was taking them out of context, or that they didn't exist, which I thought was absurd.
So at that time, were you already professionally in the missionary work?
Yes, I would say that I was professional, but I would be wrong to tell you that every missionary is trained to become a professional, because every evangelical Christian is themselves a missionary. It is the fundamental belief of Christianity that it is our job as Christians to evangelize the world, and the Jew first. So Jews are prioritized.
It's remarkable that as a person who was so indoctrinated, so steeped in the belief that to convert Jews is carrying out God's will, you managed to extricate yourself from this community of missionaries. How did your ingrained lifestyle allow you to escape?
The Orthodox Jews that I would encounter, they would make fun of me. And it was clear that I was going to have to learn a lot more than just the verses I had learned in order to convert them, that I was going to need to really know my Bible. Because I would bring up one verse like Isaiah 53, and they would ask me, what's Isaiah 52 say? Or what's Isaiah 49 say? And of course, I had only learned the one verse that I was taught that spelled out Jesus to a Jew. I didn't know all of the surrounding verses. So I went back and I thought, I'm going to have to learn everything, and I'm going to have to learn every verse, and I'm going to have to learn every chapter or the whole book if I have to, in order to really reach these Jews. Because as a Christian, I was very sincere in my love for Jews. So I really wanted to accomplish bringing them to Jesus, because that was, to me at the time, it was like the ultimate mitzvah. So in the process of learning more, things began to really fall apart and didn't make sense to me at all, because I had learned that this verse means the fulfillment of this prophecy, and then this verse means the fulfillment of this prophecy. So when I was learning the entire chapter and all of the surrounding verses, or the entire book, things really started falling apart, and I felt really stupid. I wasn't sure why it was falling apart, because I had no doubt that Jesus was the Messiah. But when I went back and learned the entire book, it really fell apart. I went to my pastor, I went to teachers with my questions and things that didn't make sense, and I kept getting the same answer, and they weren't able to explain it to me. But they ended up saying, you lack faith, which to me was offensive because I had lived and breathed my faith my entire life. I was a preacher's kid. When the doors of the church were open, I was there. I may not understand something, but I did not lack faith. So my next plan was, if I couldn't make the text work, that I'm going to learn the Jewish response to Christian missionaries. And if I learn how they respond, then I'll learn to debate them. I'll reach them and bring them to Jesus. So I went searching out, how do Jews respond to Christian missionaries? I found a rabbi that had teachings that were free online, and I started doing those. Then my whole world fell apart. Everything I believed was wrong. The Jews were right. It was a crisis that I was going through. It was very emotional. It probably sounds very strange to a Jew, but to me, even though Jesus is like an imaginary friend, it was somebody who was one with me and that I walked with and talked with every day. It was part of my life, and it was everything central to everything I was.
So what was it that finally turned you to Judaism?
I had always thought that the Bible that I was reading was true. The words were from God himself, heavenly inspired, and that every word was absolutely true. When I found out that the verses were purposely mistranslated and that there was things in there that was an obvious agenda, that infuriated me, that the church had done that. That was very upsetting. I think I went through every stage of grief. There was intense anger, then there was sadness, everything that was central in my life, my friends, my family, everything I do every day was gone. Suddenly had no purpose in life. It was very devastating. So at first, it was the scriptures themselves, seeing that they didn't make sense. What I was learning didn't exactly show that Jesus was the Messiah, and maybe didn't even exist. For a while, I went through a difficult time of feeling there is no God. I had given up on God. I decided to speak out directly to the rabbi whose lessons I had been learning, and somehow he got through to me. So he'd said if I could put Jesus aside, that God was still very much there for me, and he loved me. And from that point on, I decided I was going to study to learn the original Hebrew of the text, and I was going to learn all over, like a child going through Jewish day school, and that I wanted to learn the truth and beauty of Judaism. Once I had decided that Judaism was the path that I wanted to take, I went first to a Reform synagogue, then fairly quickly went to a conservative synagogue and started learning there. But I had attached myself to Eretz Sheva, which is where I first encountered you, Walter, and the Jewish people and different teachers that were teaching from Israel.
You were still in the United States at that time?
Yes, I was, throughout this process. So I began the process in 2005. I entered the formal conversion process probably in around 2006, 2007. I finished a Orthodox conversion in 2009. I began going to a Reform synagogue, and because I was learning online through Eretz Sheva and Aish Chabad, I was very hungry to learn more, and the Reform synagogue and the conservative synagogue seemed more like a social group. People there didn't have the answers that I was looking for. It was clear that I needed to really delve into learning much deeper. So I connected to Chabad that was nearby, and that was how I began the Orthodox process.
Would you like to say something about the reaction of your family to your decision to convert to Judaism?
My father had come to my home during my learning, and I had usually turned things backward and didn't want him to see the Hebrew. He came over one day and saw everything that I was learning out on the table, and he told me, we need to sit down because I see what you're looking at, and I see that you've changed the way you dress, you changed the way you eat. I know this. You're getting involved in a cult. He said, we need to learn together, and I need to bring you back. That was great because I had a lot of questions. And maybe he could help me, and maybe he could bring me back. I asked my father to listen to the same lessons that I had learned from this rabbi. So he agreed and look at the same material that I had learned. We agreed not to speak about it again until he had. He stayed at my house that night, and I actually heard the rabbi's lessons in the other room. He was listening to it, and he knocked on my door at 3 o'clock in the morning and sat at the end of my bed in this catatonic state. And I asked, Daddy, what's up? And he said, that man is right. I took my Bible in there and I tried to tear apart everything he said, but he's right about everything. The Jews are right. And he looked at me and asked, what do we do now? I eventually chose to convert Orthodox. My father decided not to do a conversion. He said he was too old to learn a new language, a new culture, a new religion. So he became a Noachide.
Are you saying that you actually brought your father nearer to Judaism?
My father left Christianity because of the learning that I had done. Yes, he chose to be a Noachide, but he is very close to Judaism. He's very close to Jews. You can see him writing on social media about Israel and defending Israel. He's been to Israel quite a few times. My mother was a little more difficult. I thought she'd be understanding because she had been through the Messianic Church and understood the Jewish traditions. But the teaching in Christianity is that if you don't accept Jesus, you're going to hell. That's very heavy and very difficult for a mother to go through and feel that their child is going to hell. And I have children, so I was going to hell and I was taking her grandchildren with me. Very difficult. But at the same time, you have to understand that you can't go out to eat together. You can't celebrate holidays together. Your entire lifestyle changes, which affects not just you, but your entire family.
You converted while you already had children. How did that affect the children and what became of them? Did they become Jewish?
I had 2 children. My daughter was 10 and my son was 4. They were very young. Their conversion was automatically accepted under my conversion because they were so young, and they loved it. They clung to it right away. My little 4-year-old son had long payos, and he was the rabbi in our home. They went to Jewish day school. She since went to seminary. They're both in Israel. My son is about to join the IDF.
In the last part of this program, I want to come back to proselytizing to Jews. What is the modus operandi of the missionaries? Because I believe that missionaries work by stealth and surreptitiously lead their chosen target into their net. What criteria do they employ to select their targets?
Well, of course, the unaffiliated and the less educated Jew is easier to prey on, but really, they were all our target. As far as deceitful tactics, we didn't feel it was deceitful. It's called friendship evangelism. You friend a Jew, and you become close to them, and you share day-to-day life with them, and you wait until they ask you, and then because you're not approaching them directly. Right. There are different types of missionaries. There are ones that are in your face, that are carrying a microphone around Beyneynu Street and giving out tracts and in your face. And then there's the everyday person you'll encounter on the street that's just friendly and offers you something or befriends you in some way. In Texas, we were instructed to become part of the Jewish community in different ways. I would go to the JCC and volunteer for events. I would be a greeter at many of their events and meet people, attend any of the conferences or the rallies or anything that was taking place. And I became very friendly with many Jews and became a very familiar face. So you gain credibility and their friendship.
All I hear from Christians whom I meet, we love Israel, he who blesses Israel, etc. We are visiting here because we love your country. And no, we don't want to proselytize. It sounds very convincing, and after all, we encourage Christian tourism. But can I trust those sentiments, or should I view every evangelical Christian visitor to Israel as having a deep-seated ulterior motive?
Unfortunately, when you put it that way, it doesn't sound so nice. And it's about perception. To you, it's an ulterior motive and evil and sinister. And it's a lie. But to a Christian, it's very much the opposite. They are coming out of a place of very sincere love. And even though they are being deceitful, they are told when you see somebody in a burning building, you're going to save them no matter what. And even if you have to take them kicking and screaming and explain to them why you're doing it later, you're going to save them from that situation. They're doing it out of a place of love and concern. As far as the ones that say that they don't proselytize, I have not heard them come out directly and say, I don't proselytize. They have a very sneaky way in wording it. They will say, we don't believe that a Jew has to convert to Christianity. And they say that in honesty. They don't believe that you have to convert to Christianity. They want you to stay completely Jewish. They want you to keep all of your culture and your traditions. They just want you to accept Jesus as the Messiah. They don't see that as converting to Christianity like you and I would.
Are you still active in countering Christian proselytizing to Jews?
I do not consider myself a counter-missionary. Gabrielle Sanders and I work together. We've coined the term a missionary awareness consultant. What I've done for the last 10, 15 years is monitor missionary organizations that are operating in Israel. We monitor their activities, who they're involved with, and we work with government and Jewish organizations on the partnerships that they form with them. We get asked to verify what the belief is of certain organizations, and our hope is that Jewish organizations, when they form these relationships, can set up proper boundaries and guidelines to dictate how these interfaith relationships should go about, because the evangelicals have a very strong foothold here in Israel and have infiltrated just about every part of our society. We've found it difficult to put up proper boundaries. It has been a big open embrace of everything Christian lately.
Well, that's become even more prominent now that the new Shannons TV station has opened. How shall we deal with them?
Well, this God TV situation is a very serious matter that really needs to be addressed. Their goal is to get into every Israeli home and to preach the gospel to every Jew and to bring every Jew to salvation in Jesus. And he quotes over and over again, 9 million Jews in Israel need Jesus. So he's not excluding children or elderly. He means everybody.
As you will have heard, their license has now been revoked, and that is discussed in another part of the program.
Biggest problem that we encounter in this argument is the American perception of freedom of religion and freedom of expression. And I think in that regard, we need to realize that America was founded with Christian values. They were founded very differently than Israel was founded. Concept of religious freedoms here in Israel is going to look very different than that in America. In fact, I think it is the government's responsibility to protect every Jewish person and the identity of Jews as a whole. As far as religious freedom, everybody in Israel is allowed to live and believe whatever they want to believe. There's absolute freedoms in that we have every major religion represented here in Israel. But there is a red line that should not be crossed, and that is when you target and prey upon a people, that needs to be protected.
Shannon Nuszen, keep up your valuable work, and thank you very much for your time.